Hey folks, welcome back to the bench. Well, you can see I got the wires and female bullet connector, banana plugs, bullet connectors, whatever you want to call them, all done. Took me a little while, and then I reheat shrunk them. This is actually a low temperature heat shrink, I guess you could call it. It doesn't take much to shrink it. It's meant for heat shrinking these kind of cells, but I figured I'd use it because it's clear, so you can kind of, you can see the guts inside while it's being used, and it's a little bit thinner, so it's a little bit lighter. Trying not to make this quadcopter overweight. So I learned that in the first round, that weight is the enemy, and you saw from the previous video how much lighter this frame is. You can also see I got all four motor hubs mounted up. So what I'm going to do today is physically mount all the motors and get these hooked up. I'm just going to tape them on for the time being until I know exactly where they're going to go, and then I'll tie wrap them and then feed the wires up through so everything is kosher as far as length goes, and then I can snip these ends and solder them directly to the power distribution board underneath. So first things first, let's get all these motors mounted up. Now I might have to move the props. I can't remember which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, but actually before I even do that, I'm going to take this off. I've only got a couple screws holding it on. So I need to spin that board around inside. Actually, I'll take the KK board off completely so it's not in my way for soldering purposes. There we go, take that off and set it aside. Might be heading to town today. I'll see if maybe I can find some plexiglass or some perspex or whatever the heck it's called, make a clear top plate. Let's take these off, because I don't want my soldering iron to slip and damage something. So I did a little bit of digging online last night about these these frames, and apparently they like to vibrate. They can be prone to vibration because of the flexible arms. Now those were some older versions of the frames, and I could see the one guy was actually complaining about the DJI, the original non-copy DJI frames, the fire wheels, and how flexible these arms were. These ones aren't. They're not too bad, so I think it'll be just fine. So as I said, I'm going to make the white the front, and that means this board, if you look underneath, if you can see, it says forward with an arrow. Put it right side round. So that's meant to go to the forward, so I gotta make sure that the front will be like this, and that gives me the orientation I want, because now the receiver pin's over here and I can mount the receiver on this side. So put that aside, and let's see, let's mount the motors up. I'll get all these motors mounted up, and then we'll figure out the speed controller orientation and wire lengths. Alright, got all the motors mounted up. Don't know if the props are in the right spots, but easy enough to swap them. So now, when I was looking at this, if you look, you can see down, I don't know if you can see down, you got plus and minus, whereas I want to mount these speed controllers this way so the heat sinks up, so it has a flat spot to tie wrap easy to the bottom, but then that means it'd be nice if the wires were swapped. But I'd rather mount these upwards so that they get prop wash, and which will help with the cooling. So what I'll just end up doing is having the wires cross, and no big deal. Now, getting this choke through for the radio connection. Can be tricky. Now, I was also thinking I was going to mount some banana plugs. I was going to take some. Where are they? I think I got a bunch. I think they're in their bullets. Here, I've got a bunch of these bullets. But I was thinking, what if I want to pull these speed controllers out? I was thinking of, I don't know if you can see, I'll show you on the battery connection. I was going to mount it like that. Or even sideways so that the motor speed controllers could plug in and make them easy to remove. But you know what? I'm not going to necessarily want to be removing them because I'm only going to be flying one quadcopter. If I decide down the road to build another one, so be it. I'll buy some new stuff. So now, I'm thinking that's going to mount up somewhere like that. Show you what I should do. Push the wires through. These a tight fit. I might have to come to this one. Or I might have to take my knife and open it up just a hair. Which might, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to have to do. I want them to come up through here. And the holes aren't quite big enough. And then these will just come down and solder right on. So I'm just going to open up this hole with my utility knife. Actually, let me look. I'm going to use a utility knife, but maybe what I'll do is I'll fire up my Dremel and I'll make just a little bit of room in there for the wires to come through, and then we'll get this one of these wired up. Okay, I got her Dremeled out, and you can see I noticed when I was Dremeling and out that it's definitely, I wasn't sure what kind of plastic it was. It definitely it seems like a glass filled nylon for strength, which is good. Except when you're Dremeling it, because the fibers that come out aren't necessarily good for you. But I'm just going to tape this on. This is a temporary. I'm not going to be using tape permanently. Just to get things set right. And if you check this out, yeah, I know the color codes don't match up, but I don't care. Doesn't matter, because you just reverse the wires till you get what you need. The length, I just guessed at the length when I did these wires, and I think I guessed pretty good. So I'll be able to tie wrap that down right through the center. It's going to be nice and clean. And then these wires come out, and right back, I'll do a bit of a loop right onto the board. You can see if my finger in the way. Plus and minus. So once I'm ready to permanently attach, I'll do some tie wraps through here, and that'll be a nice clean non-cluttered setup. So I'm going to do all four, get them taped on and plugged in, and then I'll snip these wires and heat up the old soldering iron. So I'll get all four mounted, and then I'll show you the process of soldering some of the wires on. We'll see how well it goes with this cheap made in China board. See how good this plating is. So I'm sure it'll take some flux and whatnot. But I'll get these mounted and I'll be right back. Well, I got all the speed controllers mounted up or taped up temporarily, and wires hooked up. Now it's a little bit of a mess, but it'll clean up pretty good once I start doing these wires. In hindsight, I maybe should have done one at a time, just so I wouldn't have all these other wires in the way, but we'll make her work. So now it's a matter of soldering on all the connections. So I'll be snipping off each bullet connector and soldering straight to the board. Fire up the get the soldering iron out. Fire up the trusty old Hacko 936. I bought this solder holder off of Deal Extreme, and it's actually quite handy. Keeps your solder from unspooling and turning into an unruly mess. So yeah, she's looking good, looking real good. So I'm going to, yeah, I know I say so a lot, but going to snip each one of these wires, leave a little bit of slack just so I have a bit of room. Don't need much slack though. Just kind of push it back like that. Take my side cutters, wire snips, whatever you want to call them, and moment of truth. There she goes. It's going to be a little bit tricky doing this. So I got to strip this wire now. So maybe if I pull from the back side, I'll get both of them to approximately the length they need to be. Cut each one. And then I'll strip them, tin the board, and solder them up. I know my arms are in the way. I'm considering doing a different camera mount. Maybe put it off to the side again, but yeah, let me know if this view is okay or if you don't like it. Okay, so now we're going to pull each one out. Ah, that won't be too bad. Now I don't use wire strippers, I just use a knife. Carefully cut the insulation and your finger if you're not careful. Because I was taught in school to try not to nick the wire strands. I'm an electronics engineering technologist by schooling, even though that's not my job. I do computers for a living, but so I am trained on how to do some of this stuff, even though it was 20 years ago now already. Alright, get my tip cleaner. Trust another Haco 599. It's like a metallic, so it scrapes the solder off the tip. And tin her up. Yeah, I know some guys say they don't use solder, some do, or sorry, some say not to use flux because it's corrosive, blah blah blah, and others do, but I use solder flux because that's what I was trained to do. I find the flux within the core of the solder just never seems to work. I'll show you the stuff I use for flux if I can find the bottle. They say, oh yeah, it's corrosive, blah blah blah, and yet I think I've shown you, and you have to clean it, but I don't know, what's that say on there? It says no clean. So if the electronics manufacturers say no clean, I would say it's probably safe. But whatever, I know I've beaten a dead horse. I usually clean it anyway, just to give it a nicer appearance, so you don't have that gold crap, all amber colored mung all over your board. I just use off the shelf isopropyl alcohol from the drugstore on a brush, or I use electronic contact cleaner. Sometimes you'll get it too. So there. I'll probably have to turn the iron up just a bit in order to solder to those pads on the printed circuit board. Now, squeeze them back through without burning my fingers. Cross them over. Flip it. Like so. Now I know you can't see just because the arm's in the way. I'm going to take a little bit of flux. Well, maybe you can see. I don't know if the camera view. It's hard to see on that little viewfinder screen what you can and can't see. So I'm just going to dab a little bit of flux on that pad. Take my iron, try not to melt the radio lead, and yeah, that tinned up good. They have it masked quite well. I don't know if you can see that or not. Pre-tinned. Then I'm going to take my trusty old El Cheapo needle nose pliers. Actually, hold on, I'm going to run and get, I've got some long nose pliers in the house. I'm going to get that'll work a lot better for this. I'll run and grab them and I'll be back. Well, I found my long pliers, which will allow me to kind of, probably maybe even reach down in here. Oh yeah, perfect. I'm going to clean my tip again, the soldering iron. Throw a little bit of fresh solder on there, just to get the heat transfer. And I'll show you what I was talking about with the flux. But actually, most of the flux that you see is coming from the wire, or from the solder itself, and not from the stuff I put on. But I'll clean it all up. There we go. There's one down. I'll show you if you can see. There you can see one down and 7 to go, so I'll finish up all these because you don't need to see me soldering all of these it's the same every time. Finish them all up and clean them up, and then we'll move on to the next step, whatever that may be. Well, there you go. I've got all the power wires hooked up, and I cleaned the board with some of my isopropyl alcohol, as I stated. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This stuff from the drugstore. Now this is 99% stuff, so it's, you gotta be careful with it if you have kids around, because it is poisonous, but it works great at cleaning the flux off. I don't know if you can see the joints are all nice and clean. And I also, since I had the power or the soldering iron heated up, I hooked the power wires up too, just so they're ready to go. Probably use an XT60 connector just like before, and they're gonna probably come through here like so, just so they're out of the way. A little bit of solder wicking up the wire, but not too bad. So now, what do I do next? Guess I could mount the KK board back in there. This is the front, like I stated. Oh, I still got to do one more thing with solder. This little wire. Now, I'm trying to think of how I should do it, because I've currently got a connector on it, like a servo connector. Actually, I can plug that right into. What should I do? I want that. That's got to read the battery voltage. So I was going to say I could plug it into the receiver, but should actually plug directly in where the battery is. So I'm trying to think of what I should do, because it's just got to come to here. I might, because I want to be able to pull that board out easily enough if needed. So maybe what I can do, let's see if I still have some. Yeah, I think I know what I'll do. Maybe if I can, there it is. I've still got a bunch of these header pins, so maybe what I'll do is I'll just solder a header pin on there, just so I can plug this in, right? Like so. It'll kind of come around. I'll probably shorten that wire up, so it'll just have a header pin, and yeah, plug right on there. That'll work alright. I'll do that. Well, you know what? I might as well do that right now. Let's fire up the soldering iron and let's see, I'll probably cut that off. I'll make sure, yeah, make sure I'm right. That's forward, so it's going to go like that. Receiver there. Motor leads, all these will come here. I might look at shortening some of these guys up too, but let's do this first. Now I've got this wired. So I've only got one. I got three 3-pin connector, but only the center pin's power. So what I'll do is I'll take a header here, and I'll probably make it a 3-position header and just or maybe a 2. 2 will work. Hold that on there just fine, but I'm going to shorten this wire up a little bit first. Of course, I turn your soldering iron on, and got a big tip on there, but for this job I don't recommend doing this. Thing's already up to temp, but I've done it enough times. Just going to pull that bad boy off. Pull this one off. Sleeve comes out of the center, fortunately. So I've got a small tip, extra small tip actually, that I filed down, so it'll work good for that job. Get that tightened on. Don't have to tighten her up too much, because then when the heat gets to it, it really gets tight. Grab my little helping hand and clip this on just on the corner. So it'd be nice to have a board vise. Maybe in the future I'll get one. And as well, I gotta get my different solder if I can remember where I put it. There it is. Buried under a few other items. The stuff I've been using is a little bit heavy. I'm going to use this stuff. This is Kester 6337 and rosin core. Some small stuff. And we'll just heat this joint. Pop the wire out, take my solder sucker. Gotta be careful with these. You don't want to overheat them, because they'll end up heating up the trace, and the trace will burn right off. So now, how I'm going to do this, turn it this way, kind of just heat it from the bottom. If I can, or actually I'll turn it sideways. Maybe, like so. And heat it from the bottom, and then stab her through, and then flow it good. Voila! Should need much. It's not a high current. Oop. It's not pretty. Clip the wire off. You don't want to clip it as really close to the board. Sometimes that'll create a bad solder joint. So gotta leave it a little bit proud. That should be good. And being that I am who I am, I'm going to grab that alcohol. Now I don't have an acid brush or anything. I need to order up a little dispenser. It's a container, and you push down on it, and it pumps the fluid up into a little bowl. Maybe I'll see if Deal Extreme has anything like that, but meantime, this will work. The thing about cleaning this joint is then you can kind of see, make sure that you don't have any solder bridges or anything like that. That looks good. Yeah, get one of those flux cleaner container thingamajiggies and it's called an acid brush. It's made specifically for this kind of thing. So there you go. Should do the trick. So now I'm going to take one of these header pins, or two of these header pins, score it. Both sides. Top. Let's see if it calls me a liar. Bottom. Now in theory, bad boy should just break off. Just like so. These are handy to have if you're into electronic stuff like this. Have some in your toolbox. Alright. So now I'm going to tin. This has got to be a little tricky, because you can't heat these things up too much because they end up melting on you. The plastic that holds the pins in place. So got my iron turned down. Just gonna tin it quick. Tin it quick. So get this out of my way now. And see if I can get that on there in a decent manner. I think this calls for my long needle nose pliers again. Looks like it can come from the side. The needle nose pliers will help sink some of the heat to keep the plastic from melting. So we're just going to kind of, in theory, preheat it. Probably pop the power wire off. Okay, this may not work. It's on there. Actually, that's on there pretty good. I don't know if you can see that. Nice little header on there. Perfect! There you go. Another little problem solved. Problem, if you want to call it that. So I like doing these things. I don't like just buying a kit and slapping parts on it and calling it a project or anything like that. So I find this kind of thing much more interesting. Not just buying another manufacturer's products and swapping parts out. So now we'll screw the KK board back on. So there. So now, in theory, I can just take this wire or this and give her a twist, and there you go. There's my battery voltage sense. Nice and neat. Cool. So now, I don't know what else I should do. I'm about ready to pack it in for this video. Actually, I'll tie wrap these on. But I'm about ready to pack it in for this video, and it's not much more I can do. I'm waiting for some more gear so I can make that little camera do what I want it to do, because the camera's no good if you don't have a transmitter receiver. So that's still coming. So I think I'm going to stop this video here, and the next video of this unit will be the installation of the transmitter and receiver and whatnot. So hope you're enjoying this series. Until I get my new stuff, take care, and talk to you later.